If you haven't heard of us, we haven't been at Skoll very often, but we're a company, a consulting firm for the most part, that works with leaders all over the world in mostly multinationals, not so much in the social enterprise space, and so we're moving into that right now. And we really work on focusing on greatness. We help individual leaders find the thing that's great about them that they can use to take forward and create a great organization ultimately by creating great teams in between those two things. So some of the organizations we work with have leaders of this kind of range. So everyone from a Howard Schultz to an Oprah Winfrey, which is a little bit of a strange spectrum. And then leaders of some companies such as Hyatt, Facebook. What are some of the other ones who are?
Yeah.
IBM.
IBM. We're also starting to work a bit more with social sector leaders or groups of organizations coming together to collaboratively solve a problem. So we're working with Laureen Powell-Jobs at the Emerson Collective in San Francisco. She's working on a big initiative called XQ, which is focused on using a design approach to create a new version of the American high school. We've also worked closely with Maria Eitel, who has been the chairwoman of the Girl Effect and at the Nike Foundation, and helped them develop their programming and kind of separating from the Nike Foundation last year.
But again, because our work is focused on leaders and making sure that those individual leaders can be the greatest they can be in order to create something great in the world, it makes all of us here today you're all focused on the same things. And so we're going to bring some of what we've learned, hopefully, to you today, and use this day to help you figure out how to lead into the unknown a little bit, which is what your day job is probably like. And you've been here getting really inspired and having all these great networks and connections and having things spark in your brain and your heart that you're inspired by, and then you're all going to get on airplanes and go back to your jobs. And sometimes the fear is that all this kind of withers away because you go back right into the day-to-day of trying to be a great leader and run your organization. So the Skoll team really wanted to have a session where you could take a moment, take in what you learned, reflect on it, have a little bit of conversation at tables, and create a plan for yourself so that there's some momentum when you go back to take some of the things you learned into your work. So we're going to experiment with that here today with all of you. So we're thrilled to have you and have you try this out. So, another way to summarize that is how can we channel this into purposeful action that makes a positive change in our communities? So we're going to focus on action plans and verbs, things that you can actually do as you go back. And it'll start with a little reflection. So the first session I was in here was the one on mindfulness. And I thought that was for me, a full circle way to end on this session and think about what were the things that I took in that might be helpful for me going back in. So what we're going to do is hand out a little working booklet for you that you're going to use for the rest of the time here. And we'll ask you to answer the first question in it on page 2. We'll walk around with these, which is to think about 3 things that really stuck with you from the session. And it could be anything. It could be one comment that somebody made to you. It could be a particular session and the things that you learned from listening to the group discuss it. It could be something that somebody said to you in a hallway, some interaction you had over in the collaboration cafe. And if anybody doesn't have enough, here you go. Sorry. There's a couple. Just each take one. Are you good? Yep. So go to page 2 and think about 3 things. Write down the 3 things that stuck with you the most. Just reflect back over your few days since Tuesday. And write them down in the 3 boxes. And then we'll move on from there. We'll keep time, so we'll keep you guys honest with time. So just take your time and do that. Go to a mindful place. And then as you get to the end of your writing, just turn to the other people who are with you at your table and share what your takeaways were with each other. Have a little conversation at your table. Take a couple minutes, and then we'll stop you. I want you to answer this one. So 3 things that you took away from the session, anything. It could be a quote, it could be some note you wrote in your notebook, whatever it might be. All right. I see some great exchanging going on, some good, I think sometimes it's helpful to articulate the thing that was powerful to you. It's helpful to actually write it down and then have to explain it to someone. It's like being a teacher. It's a great kind of humbling and clarifying move. So it sounds like you guys had some good exchanges at your tables. We'll come back to the three things in a little bit. Right now what we want to do is think about the fact that while many of you have different titles, you come from different parts of the world, some of you are funders, some of you are executive directors, some of you are on the ground, all over the place, but you're all leaders. And we want to speak to each other and learn today as co-leaders or a colleague of leaders here. So what we want to do for a second is talk about what is it that leaders do. We're not going to dwell on this. It's not going to feel like a lecture. But let's just get back in our heads about what is it that leaders are actually responsible for that's different than practitioners, that's different than consultants. And then we're going to have you think about your responsibilities as leaders that you all share, and where you're doing really well in those, and where maybe you have some room to grow. Do a little reflection on that, and then we're going to take that into your leadership plan. So let's just go through those for a second. That was a page with all 7, but I'll go through them quickly. So just in general, right? Leaders have to develop a clear and purposeful vision of a state ahead that everybody's trying to get to. So it's your job to actually articulate that to people. You have to have it, and then articulate it and help make that clear for people. Sometimes you have to do that and create a presentation for your board that describes your goals. That might be a way that you manifest that responsibility. Other times you are creating stories that you're telling the media or funders, or whoever it might be, to be able to make that clear. But that's one of your key responsibilities as a leader.
And storytelling has been a big theme of the conference. I know a lot of you have spent time thinking about that.
So. That's a good point. Then you have to create a plan that takes that vision, makes it real, makes it actually tangible, and put actions over time. And I know that all of you spend a lot of time doing that. I've heard that over and over and over again about strategies and goal setting and all these kinds of things. That's obviously another responsibility of yours. You have to then build people's belief that that vision and that plan are valid, that there's some logic to them, that they will have an intended outcome. I've heard a lot about the pressure of that piece of it. But sometimes the building belief piece is about storytelling, to Natalie's point. It's about engaging your own organization or a group of funders it might be, to actually say that your thing, your vision, your strategy are the ones to get behind. So there's a lot of belief building that you need to do. Then you have to design the system. This is kind of gross language, but kind of the system that makes that possible. So you have to create the right teams to execute that. You have to put in place accountability, decision-making rights, things like that, to be able to move that plan forward now that people believe in it. You have to actually kind of, as we say in our office, get shit done. So this is the get shit done part. Excuse my language. As a leader, you actually have to make decisions to move things forward. That's what makes leaders different from consultants. So we advise on decisions. You actually have to make them. That's sometimes the toughest thing. I was in the session on leadership kind of bench development and succession planning. This came up. Maybe not explicitly, but we were talking about decision making quite a bit in that session, and it's something unique to leaders. You then have to create a culture in your organization that reinforces the beliefs and values that matter to you. And that is everything from what rituals do you have as a team as you move forward? What behaviors do you endorse and do you support and do you reinforce through your actions with the team, explicitly or just in your gestures and how you interact with each other? And then you have to show up with presence to earn the trust to do all of the 6 things before this. So there's a way that you have to be with your teams and with your funders and with the people who you're serving to show that you deserve to be listened to. You deserve, and I don't mean deserve because you've claimed it, but because you've made the right argument, you've built the right belief, you have the right plan. But there's a presence piece. It's very much about that individual and how they show up every day. So the next thing we want you to do is, the next few pages in this are asking you to do 2 things. One is to identify what leadership moment are you in right now in your organization. So on page 3 on the left-hand side, we have some suggested moments. Everything from you're in a moment of having to scale for impact, to you're in a moment that you're entering some kind of new space with your organization, to you're having to solve a problem you've never encountered. Maybe you have to fire somebody who's been with the organization for a long time. It could be all different levels, but identify what that moment is. And if it's not listed here, that's fine, just write it in. But get really clear about, for you right now, in your leadership, what is that moment? So write that down first. And then, no, you can pick a couple. If there are a couple that you feel are particularly guiding your behaviors these days, you can write down a couple. But get clear about it. So just take 30 seconds and do that. So if all leaders share those 7 responsibilities, and all leaders are constantly in certain moments in their leadership journey, we found in our work that there are capabilities that the leaders who are most successful exercise as they're taking on those responsibilities and moving into unknown spaces. I'm not going to go through those in great detail, but I want to point out one of them that I think we want to take as our spirit of, to inform what you're going to do for the rest of the time here. So we talk about optimism, creativity, authentic communication, something we call humanity, and brave action. Optimism meaning you are the person who, when you see a challenge, can reframe it as an opportunity. You're always able to look at the future differently than your organization. It doesn't mean being Pollyanna. It means reframing. Creativity, meaning, yes, use imagination. All of you are very resourceful people, I'm sure, because of the space that you're in. But what creativity also means is not just having the imagination, but actually literally creating a way forward, prototyping your way into a future. Any of you who were at the design session yesterday with Tim Brown and Roger Martin heard a lot about this, about making small moves and prototyping your way to a better future. That's what we mean by creativity when we talk to our leaders who we work with. Authentic communication, meaning you have to identify the moment, just as you did, that your organization is in and figure out how to communicate about that moment with your people. And that doesn't always mean being entirely transparent. It can mean recognizing what's needed of you, what they need to hear from you at any one moment, and bringing that forward in your communication with the team. Humanity. This is about the character piece of humanity, but it's also about recognizing the things that make the humans that you work with unique and bringing that forward. Sometimes the things that make the individuals who are on your teams unique are not the things that you typically need from them in the role they're playing. But the really great leaders, when they're in stuck moments or unknown moments, are able to see a hidden talent in somebody and figure out, not only at a systemic level in their organization, how to encourage those things to come forward, but how to identify it in someone and ask them to be that thing for any particular moment, because the organization needs it right then. Finding the thing that the human, truly human, unique thing about each person. And then brave action is where we're going to focus right now. So what we're going to ask you to do is, again, as I sort of mentioned, we're going to say, given the moment you're in, given those 7 responsibilities of leaders, you're going to go through the next couple pages where the 7 are listed and answer some questions for yourself, thinking about what kind of bold action might you want to take, ultimately, when you go back into your day jobs. So start with page 4, 5, and 6, and under each, those responsibilities I read off a second ago, think about, yes, have I done this thing? Have I performed my duties as a leader when it comes to, for example, articulating a vision? If so, great. Is there something more I could do there? If you haven't, write some notes about why. Answer the question here. This helps prompt you to think about what do you need to do to be able to make sure you check that box. And just write some notes to yourself. And think about brave action as you're doing it. There might be a boldness that you might need to take in completing these responsibilities. So we're going to ask you to just work by yourself for the next couple minutes and go through page 7 and complete the 7 responsibilities and doing some deep soul searching about how you've delivered on your leadership responsibilities. And then we're going to have a conversation about it. So we had you think about things that inspired you most about the conference, things that you want to take back because they're sticking in your brain. We had you think about the leadership moment you're in. We all reflected on the things we're all responsible for as leaders, no matter what type of leader you are, no matter what type of organization, and kind of assess where you've accelerated and where maybe you have some gaps. What we want you to do is think back to the 3 things you wrote down the first moment on page 2, and think about how might any of those bits of inspiration help you on the pieces where you said, I haven't really completed that responsibility. Might they help you accelerate that? And have a conversation at your table about that for 5 minutes. We'll hold you back. So just share something that you still think you have to work on one of these leadership responsibilities from pages 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if any of your inspiration coming in can help you achieve any of those things. So just talk to someone at your table about that. All right, here's what I'd like to have happen. We're going to ask a couple of you to speak. So, is anyone willing to share one of the 7 things where you answered not really, and share what you think you need to do after this reflection to be able to make that closer to a yes? So on any of the 7. So anyone willing to say, okay, this is one I've actually not really completed my responsibilities on, and here's what I think I might do to be able to make that happen. Anybody? We're going to pass the microphone around. Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
And say your name, please.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Vic Moan from Blue Ventures. The box I ticked for not really was having a plan that delivers on our vision. So I've got the vision really clear. I'm great at talking about it. I'm less strong on the detail. And one of the things that came up in the 3 take-home messages was about clarity. So I'm going to take that reminder about the importance of razor-sharp clarity and filling in the detail on making sure I create a really good plan or co-create it with my team.
That's great. Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Dinesh from Foundation for Ecological Security, where we have a clear, purposeful vision, and we have a team of people, core team of people who believe in that. What I think is we lack some systems and procedures which would enable us to reach that goal. There's a lot of improvement in that. We are in that direction, and I think we need to do much more.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm Annie Griffiths, and I think the toughest leadership thing for me is finding a way to hold board members and people accountable. It's, I'm one of those people that's just like, well, I'll just do it myself, and which is not sustainable. So that's a huge challenge for me because I don't want to upset people. I don't want to, and I have to get over it.
We talk sometimes, by the way, with the leaders. This isn't uncommon. I'm sure many of you go, yeah, I'm using my passion to do more of the doing than maybe I should. And it's hard when you're resource constrained. It's a very easy reason to be a doer as well as a leader. But with a lot of the leaders we talk about this model of do, model, coach, enable. And that leaders should spend more of their time enabling and coaching than doing. And maybe a little modeling. They should do some modeling, but less doing, more coaching and enabling. Anyway, thanks, Annie, for that. Someone else? Someone from this side of the room. The quiet side.
So one thing that I think to add on, probably a lot of us need to be, as we're starting to depending even if you're a proof of concept or starting to scale, processes and systems are really important, and something that we've been working on. We're a consulting type model, and so we have about 20 full-time staff, about 20 consultants, and working all over the world. And so especially when you're bringing in consultants, and we need to train them on our processes and systems, it's been harder as we're growing faster. So we've been looking at some online platforms for training the different training our different kind of modules that you can do video, and you can say, okay, here's how you do a Vision and Perfect workshop, and it has videos and demonstrations, and we're just in the process of that. But so far with our testing, it's been really, really helpful. So food for thought for other people.
Great.
But
really
I think this really helps me. Like, okay, yes, this is a priority, and we need to make it happen fast. So
Good.
thank you.
Glad. There's someone else at that table, and then we'll move here.
Yeah,
What's your name?
I work with a network of 40 organizations. So, although I think we have like a very clear vision of where we want to go, climate, forest, and stuff, I think I'm very anxious to move faster and faster and faster, and I sometimes feel that I lose, like
Everybody.
the 40 organizations to be on the same page. So this is a frustration for.
Yes, I feel like that's a familiar one as well. Especially visionaries, are great at seeing, and then enacting and enabling everybody to come along with them sometimes can be the gap to make up.
Others?
My name's Warren from Bar Regional, where Skoll World is from 2009. I've been going 22 years, and actually I tick not really for almost everything. So it's a time of change, just personal and organisational. But as you might say. But also just starting to realize we have multiple interconnected dysfunctional systems out there, and it's really, really hard, and it's got harder to do what's right, I think, out there. So I just want to share that actually. And my little bit of inspiration was actually in a workshop with Brian Stevenson from Equal Rights, and he said, "I'm a broken man," and that's where I get, this energy. And I feel I'm not quite broken enough yet. And our systems are not quite broken enough to really create the future we need. So I think it's going to be a time of change for all of us.
That's great. Thanks for your honesty about that.
Yes. Say your name too, please.
My name's Garth. I'm a serial entrepreneur. That sounds like a serial murderer, but it's...
We were waiting for that noun.
Yeah. And a lot of the work I do is trying to sell a vision, not internally, because we get what we're trying to do, and that's good, but is trying to raise resources. And it suddenly struck me, a lot of the work we do is actually about storytelling. But when I do an elevator pitch, it's not a story. And I suddenly realized that if I can craft a couple of quick stories, if somebody says to me, "What do you do?" and I'll say, "I'll tell you a story," that is much more likely to engage them than "this is what we do." So that was just a sudden, oh, okay.
That's a great insight. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lindsay, and I'm one of those consultants. So, but sort of on behalf of my table, I think several of us were really inspired this week by the idea of living your values and acting your values. And I think I see it a lot in clients that I work with, but in terms of making a plan, creating systems and structures, having your vision, having your culture, and the people behind you, somehow embedding your values within all of those elements of your work, I think is so important, and that really kind of came home this week for me.
That's great. Thank you. One more. Anybody else? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Hi, Michael Thatcher, CEO of Charity Navigator. I think I also checked off just about, not really on all of them, and one of the thoughts I had was about the disconnect between myself or doing versus enabling others to do. And how a frustration I have is a lack of openness and, let's say, inspiredness in some of my team. And then suddenly looking around the room, realizing they need to be here, not me. And so how do I create these experiences for my team as a way forward?
Great insight. Thank you. Thanks to all of you who spoke. Really appreciate it. So here's what we'd like to do for the next few minutes is, now that you have a sense of what you need to make up, let's get down some actual actions that you're going to take going back. So we've got some pages that fold out here that are about a 90-day action plan. We said 30. I think we advertised 30, but we're actually going to stretch you to 90. So there are a couple questions across the top of this fold out. What are major moves and decisions? Back to the thing about decision making, if any of you put not really, that you need to make progress, and maybe mark those milestones on your timeline. Then think about who are you going to, when you write down all of the things you need to do, think about who you need to bring along. Who do you need to share this with? Who do you need to convince these are the right things to do? How are you going to bring some of the inspiration from this conference that might inform some moves? How are you going to bring that into your plan? And then what else are you going to need to be successful? So 90 days from now, you probably have things you know you need to do in 90 days that are true before you got here and since you've been here. But getting purposeful about them and thinking about how the inspiration of this conference or these conversations or your assessment of yourself, how that figures into your 90 days. Are there things you should be doing sooner? Are there stories you need to tell? Are there bits of inspiration you need to bring your team? Are there admissions about your own leadership that you need to actually bring to your deputies in your organization? Say, this is something I realized about myself, and here's what I need all of us to do. Put that in a plan. Put that down in 90 days. Give yourself some actions. Do you have staff meetings? Do you have times when you bring your team together? Do you have conversations that are coming up? What might you use those for, given some of the reflection you've just done? So write those things down on your plan. You're going to take this home with you. And take about, we're not going to spend a ton of time, maybe 10 minutes, mapping those things out. We'll do a little bit of group reflection, and then we'll get you out of here at 11:15, right on time. But we want you to get purposeful. So I noticed that for some of you,
saying these things, people are coming to you.
for some of you, it was very easy to write down a lot of
I believe in these
things.
things. And
And for some of you, it was maybe
literally, I mean, that's how ideas spread, right? So, anyway.
a little bit overwhelming because maybe you wrote
Nice
down
to meet
not
you.
really on a lot of those leadership responsibilities, which is great. You're honest with yourself. We weren't sure how much time we would have for this part of the exercise, and so we wrote it in such a way that you can do it when you get back, when you get on the plane. But if you are stumped, I would suggest you take one of the things that you wrote not really about, and maybe there's one thing you know you have to do to close that gap a little bit, and just map out those activities over 30, 60, 90 days. If you had to have a board presentation to build belief in your plan, and that's a thing that you know you have to do, don't try to boil the ocean here. Just say, okay, what am I going to do 10 days from now? Am I going to have an outline of that conversation? Am I going to schedule this call with this person who I know is on the board who's a kind of a bellwether for me, who I can test my ideas with? Just get very tactical about this stuff. Give yourself some momentum coming out of here so you don't go back and think, oh, there's so much I have to do and I don't even know how to find time for it. I don't know how to make it happen. Hold yourself accountable by just marking those little moves down on your calendar and just holding yourself accountable for that. Anybody want to share anything about something they wrote down and something that they didn't realize they had to do and this helped them make it more tangible and actionable for them? Is anyone up for blurting one of those things? Wait for the microphone before you blurt.
It wasn't a new revelation, but I think talking about it out loud, someone was like, yeah, it's okay to do what you need to do.
Good.
So it was very helpful, just that support of
Yeah.
saying, yeah, go do what you already know you need to do. So
Yeah, that's great. Get some coaching from your peers.
Well, maybe I'll just add to that. I think that something I'm thinking a lot about is how I communicate what I'm doing and what I need to do, and communicating both along the way the successes but also the failures, because I think sometimes when we kind of hit a snag or we don't achieve something, we're just working on figuring it out. But I think I'm just thinking about how I can more consistently communicate what's going well and where we need to focus more energy on.
That's great. Love that.
I'm Neil Yo, the Energy and Climate Lead at Oxford University, part of the MBA course here. And the one thing I realized is just not to discount that if there's things that you felt you should have done at the beginning and you're thinking it's too late now, to go, actually, hang on a second, it's not too late for me to meet up with each of my members individually and actually find out what their expectations are, what they want, how I can intrinsically motivate them. Even if I was supposed to do it 3 months ago, it's probably a good idea to do it now. So
There's hope for procrastinators, right? One more hand. Okay, one more person, and then we'll have a couple of small things to do.
This should have been obvious. My next child is due in about 90 days, but all of a sudden it brought into focus that I have to actually start developing the template for my maternity leave plan with my team.
Awesome. All right. Now you have a map to write those things down. That's great. Thank you all. So here, a couple things we're going to ask in our last few minutes here. One is, this whole conference was about fierce compassion. And we wanted to just let you do one kind of last mind sweep on, in the spirit of fierce compassion, would you change or add anything to that plan? Are there any things you want to take back to your team that show how you demonstrate that might be a kind of a spirit that you bring to one of those activities, a brave action that you bring to one of those activities that you wrote down in the plan? So just think about that for a second. We were going to have you share that, but I think in the interest of time, I'll just have you reflect on that as you leave and as you go back over the activities that you wrote down. So just make sure you bring the spirit of what brought you here into the plan when you take it back. Two other quick things. This moment here was a bit of an experiment. So many conferences don't take the time for everybody to synthesize their thinking at the end. And so Skoll really wants to know if something like this is successful, whether, and so we ask that you fill these out honestly, and just leave them on the tables before you leave so that they can really get a sense of, should we have more moments like this, with this kind of an interaction next time. And then finally, I would encourage all of you, because we made this as a workbook, because we knew we wouldn't get through it here. It's something that could take a half a day if we really did it paced out. But I would encourage you to go back through it, do some more reflection. Doing it in 10-minute chunks isn't enough. Really think about as a leader, what does my org need from me? And go back to that presence one, that last one about how I show up every day. Really think about that piece and how, if you focused there, could it help you in the other 6? Maybe in some of those things you're stuck around, some of those places where you have particular gaps. And think about what you're going to bring back of this experience to your team. As you hear Michael and others say, it's such a wealth of insight and input that you get here. And holding it to just yourself would be kind of a shame. So what parts of that do you want to take back to your team as a leader and use it as a moment to demonstrate your presence? The other thing I'll just say is we weren't sure how big a group would show up for this, so we made a lot of these booklets. So if you have a team and you want a couple people to go through this, we'll put the rest of them up here, and why don't you guys just feel free to, I mean, it's going to make you come this direction, which might be a little awkward, but we'll leave them up here, and feel free to take a few with you. And then a couple people have asked for the presentation, and we'll figure out a way to make that available to you if you want it as well. And you're always welcome to reach out to us if you have questions about your own work or something in this booklet or whatever. You know, we're happy to advise you in whichever way we can. We're based in San Francisco and New York, our 2 offices. Yeah. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your attentiveness, and I hope this was helpful to you. And enjoy the rest of your time and safe travels home.